Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, OPEC. After months of inaction, the oil cartel surprised everyone by agreeing to cut production for the first time in 8 years. But as ever, the devil's in the details, and there are precious few of those right now. We'll look at what might be next for the stagnating price of oil. Also this week, just who owns the internet? The US government's preparing to hand over supervision of part of it to a private company. We'll size up what's at stake for the thing which, let's face it, billions of us rely on every single day. Plus our interview with the head of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, where she reveals what she thinks is needed to place the world on a firmer financial footing. So back in April, with the oil price in serious trouble, we spent 12 hours at an extraordinary OPEC meeting here in Doha, where in the end, nothing was agreed. So as such, any meeting of oil producers since then hasn't come with much anticipation of any sort of pricing or production breakthrough. And then, out of nowhere, something does happen. At the International Energy Forum being held in Algiers, OPEC members decided to cut production, only by about 800,000 barrels a day, and not across all members, but still, it was a cut, and the first in 8 years. We're going to look at the bigger picture in just a moment. First, this from Victoria Gatenby.
For the first time in 8 years, hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil could stop flowing from pipelines like these. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, has decided to limit the amount of oil it produces. It's meant to stabilise falling global oil prices. Leaders from the 14-member bloc, which controls the bulk of the world's oil reserves, made the decision at an informal summit in Algeria.
We came up with a way forward that is to consider targeting 32.5 to 33 million barrels per day.
Countries which rely on oil income have struggled because oil prices have dropped from $110 a barrel in 2014 to less than $30 a barrel this year. Many have welcomed OPEC's decision to cut production by 750,000 barrels a day.
Today, OPEC has taken a historic decision. OPEC will go back to its role of monitoring the market. It's a role that it lost many years ago, but is now reclaiming.
But details of the announcement remain unclear, including crucial specifics on which countries will reduce oil production, how long that will last, and how OPEC will enforce its decision. An OPEC meeting in November will finalise the details, but ironing out differences won't be easy.
Compliance has always been an issue, a historic challenge for all OPEC members. We've seen that in the past, when Saudi Arabia is serious about cutting down oil, it has significantly impacted the oil price.
Analysts say oil price wars have been influenced by competition between traditional oil producers and US shale producers, and regional tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran have also contributed. But Saudi Arabia and Gulf countries insist no political decisions were taken and oil production is based on demand and supply. The fall of oil prices has led cash-strapped countries to lay off workers and halt development programs. Economies from Venezuela to Nigeria have faced dwindling foreign reserves, reduced production and imports. An expected rise in oil prices could help them reverse that trend.
Well, to discuss this decision taken by the OPEC members in Algiers, we're joined by Amrita Sen. She's co-founder and chief oil analyst at Energy Aspects, joining us this week from Nice. I think this deal was a surprise, first of all, we can say that. But then when you look at it, it only sort of feels like a headline number and not a lot of detail. For you, as an oil analyst, is there enough detail for you to make an honest assessment?
Oh, no, I don't think there is. But like you said, I think the market wasn't expecting a deal. One of the things we noticed heading up to Algeria was there was definitely a shift in tone from Saudi Arabia. It was a lot more conciliatory. There was a lot more kind of impetus towards pushing towards a deal. Partly because I think everybody just needs and wants higher prices. So I think that's the biggest change over here, that they could come to an agreement after 2 years of pretty much very, very bitter discord between a lot of the groups. But the devil is still in the detail, which is missing. A lot of different numbers being thrown around. Potential cut of 800,000 barrels per day spread between the GCC members and some other countries as well. But Libya and Nigeria will be allowed to increase production. Of course, Iran will be expected to freeze output at around current levels, but that's where the vagaries lie. It's around current levels, whether it's 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, none of that has been decided yet. So it needs a little bit more time to get to the details, and it's not going to be easy either.
But I mean, when we're talking total output numbers of 32, 33 million barrels of oil a day, and this is a cut of 800,000 odd, is that really that significant, or are we looking more at the symbolism of the fact that they all managed to agree on something for once?
I think the cut is significant because what's happened this year so far is that non-OPEC production has collapsed because of low oil prices, but OPEC production has risen to make up for that shortfall. And that's why prices haven't recovered to the extent it should have, and inventories haven't fallen. So now if OPEC does actually manage to limit its production by say 400,000 to 500,000 barrels per day, even if not the full 800,000, that suddenly means that the stock draws accelerate. Potentially next year, you're looking at draws of over 800,000 barrels per day. So the balancing will then be achieved a lot quicker, and we will see higher prices. But again, the details will need to be worked out first.
It might be worth actually explaining the time frame as well for our viewers, because as I understand, we've actually got to wait a few months for this deal to be ratified first, and then it would actually only come into effect, you know, early next year.
I think so, because if you think about it, we're at the end of September, so even if they were to come up with the deal yesterday, it wouldn't affect October balances. The loadings have already occurred and the ships are sailing to the destinations. So the earliest this can actually have an impact is November. But given the fact that this will take time to sort out and it will probably get ratified at the 30th November OPEC meeting, you are genuinely looking at next year as the main impact from this.
Okay, so let's talk big picture again, and you mentioned this in your first answer, but I would like to go back to it in some detail, and that is Saudi Arabia. The fact that it made a concession here, and it will probably be the one that cuts the bulk of those 800,000 barrels of oil. For so long, it was just clinging on to that market share, wasn't it? Even with the price collapsing, it was determined not to let that go, and now it has. So, if nothing else, it's a significant move.
Absolutely, and I do think that is the biggest takeaway over here, the change in tone, the body language from Saudi Arabia, that they are willing to work together with other producers. And it's not that they haven't been trying to do that. They tried to do that in Doha as well. Other producers also need to give something, and the key bottleneck over here has been Iran, because earlier they were not even willing to talk about their production. Now they are at least on the table, and because they are coming to the table and trying to, talk and come to an agreement, Saudi Arabia has made the move that they will cut back production to January levels. Well, let me remind you of one thing, that is still much, much higher than production was at 2014, and it's going back to 2015 levels. So from an historic point of view, Saudi Arabian production will remain very high, and they're not really going to lose out on a lot of market share. But yes, I think the big change is that at least now they're willing to talk about it and consider a cut in output, not just a freeze, or as you said earlier, not just an extremely standoffish attitude and not talking to anybody.
Is it a good-ish deal for Iran? You mentioned Iran and Libya and Nigeria as the three exceptions to the cuts. Is it satisfactory, though, for Iran, given that they are still only really coming back to the oil markets now?
I think the tricky bit with Iran at the moment is that it's very clear that they can't increase production beyond 3.6 to 3.7 million barrels per day in the short term. In the last 4 months, they have literally not produced more than 3.6 million barrels per day. However, even if the whole world knows that, Iran isn't willing to accept that. They still want to be able to get to 4 million barrels per day, however difficult or unrealistic it may be. And that's where I'm not convinced that all the details have been thrashed out yet, because Saudi Arabia would like Iran to freeze at current levels simply because it knows Iran can't produce more than that. Iran, at least for the pure optics, is not willing to accept that, at least openly, and they still want to push that 4 million barrels per day. So I think the wordings will be interesting, whether they freeze at current levels or whether they're allowed to increase. I don't think if Iran pushes for increase, the deal goes through. I think they will have to give some concession and say, yes, we are willing to freeze output, even if it's just for a year.
Amrita Sen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your insight.
Thank you.
As we know, the price of oil has a massive effect on the wider global economy, and indeed every October the International Monetary Fund, along with the World Bank, holds an annual meeting about the key challenges facing the world's economy. Ahead of this year's event, our diplomatic editor James Bays sat down with the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Here's what she had to say about the rhetoric of the US presidential election and gender equality.
So there is an important event coming up soon, which is the US presidential election. When you listen to the rhetoric of the campaign, are you worried that this could mean globally more protectionism?
We are generally worried about the potential rise of protectionist measures that we are seeing. And we are worried about the rhetoric here and there and from many corners and many angles. Because we have seen trade over the course of time bring up countries in low income, middle income and emerging market economy circles. And globalization, if you include, trade, integration, technology, innovations, all that together can be a force for good, only under the condition that those who are not equipped, who are not educated, who are not able to adjust are helped in the process. And for that there has to be public and private efforts in order to help them along.
One of your focuses, and I know it's one of your focuses here at the General Assembly, is gender equality. You've gone on record as saying women need skin as thick as an old crocodile to get on.
Look at me.
You're constantly meeting the world's political, financial, business leaders, and I bet you most of those meetings are with men. How do you change that?
First of all, I celebrate the woman in them, because I think there is that dimension as well. And second, in addition to reminding all of them that it is a moral imperative, I also remind them, and we have now documents, analysis, numbers, it is an economic no-brainer. It boosts growth, it helps with diversification of the economy, it reduces inequality, and that applies at the global level, at the domestic level, and in the public as well as the private sector. So efforts have to be undertaken, deliberate efforts to include women. It does not reduce the pie, it does not eliminate boys, men, it improves the position.
Christine Lagarde, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Thank you.
And still ahead on counting the cost, an interplanetary transport system designed to take humans to Mars. But how? Who'll fund it? And do we really need to go there? All that a little later on. Let's look at the internet right now, though, which is a pretty broad subject, I know. But as of the 1st of October, the US government will no longer supervise the internet's domain name system. In other words, the backbone of a network that now connects more than 3.5 billion people. What does that actually mean? Here's our technology editor, Tarek Bazley, with more.
Rather than being one global network, the internet's actually made out of millions of smaller networks. Each of these are autonomous and connect to each other on a voluntary basis. To do this, they use an address system known as domain names. We use them every day, Google or Aljazeera.com, for example, or new names like .shopping or .games that have just become available in the last few weeks. The non-profit Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN, has the job of managing this naming system. It was created in 1998 by the US government, and its stated mission is to ensure the stability of the internet through an open, fair and balanced process. Satisfied that ICANN is now doing this, the US government is stepping back from its supervisory role.
Businesses and civil society, technical experts and governments are all there on equal footing, as they have been really since ICANN's inception. So it's really the US stepping away and letting this community organize its own affairs.
Domain names have become increasingly valuable and are now an important part of the public identity of both organisations and individuals. Last year, a Swedish court seized the domain names of one of the world's most popular file-sharing websites, Pirate Bay, saying it helped people break copyright laws. ICANN wasn't involved in the case, but activists say it demonstrates what's possible when a naming system remains in the hands of a central authority.
What if the state could confiscate your actual name for breaking the law? Because domain names are increasingly becoming an important part of our identities.
ICANN says its processes are transparent, and any changes to the system are first agreed by all those involved.
This administrative function of updating the addresses is simply just adding those addresses to the file, the address book. And it's actually just a list of addresses, and it's updated in a very open and transparent way.
The US government's decision to step back from ICANN has been described as largely clerical, and there is likely to be no discernible change from the point of view of the 3.5 billion people who use the internet. It's also being seen as a coming of age for an organisation that has the complex job of managing something as dynamic as the internet in a way that until now has stopped it from being controlled by one organisation or dominated by a few special interests.
Well, let's discuss this further. Joining us from Toronto is Andrew Sullivan. He's a fellow at Dyn, a Toronto-based internet performance company. Andrew, it's good to have you with us. To your mind, what is the best way to safeguard the internet? Keep it open, keep it free from political interference, that's important, and make sure that we're guaranteeing and safeguarding it for future generations of users.
The best way, I think, is to continue with the current IANA stewardship transition. Nobody owns the internet, and so the way to continue that tradition of openness is to make sure that we keep using the internet the way it was designed to work, and that involves completing this transition.
Okay then. In a few weeks' time, though, we've got the US Commerce Department, which will stop exercising its contractual control over ICANN. Some US politicians want to stop this from happening. They say there's a real risk here to freedom of the internet, and that ICANN could become a monopoly, could be overseen by no one, even the UN could take control, which would then bring, politics into play. Are those fears justified?
Well, I don't think the fears are justified, but I want to start first by correcting a couple of misunderstandings. The first one is that ICANN doesn't actually control all of the addresses, all of the web addresses. So they control a part of the web addresses, the very top level domain. So in a domain name like www.example.com, what ICANN has control over is just the control of the com piece. Who is in charge of com versus org or something like that. The rest of the address is actually controlled by somebody else. The second thing is that actually the Department of Commerce does not have control over ICANN. What it has is a contract with ICANN for just the function that allows ICANN to publish that top-level domain zone. So the control that currently exists is actually considerably less than people seem to think. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that there isn't actually any control over the internet here. So politicians who are concerned about this going to the UN or to another country or something like that, they're all worrying about a problem that can't happen in any case.
Okay, but nevertheless, there have been quite a few controversies in the past over the way in which names are allocated and how internal reviews are conducted. It makes me wonder if ICANN is really ready to do this job on its own. What do you think?
Well, it's not doing it on its own. The thing that's interesting about this controversy is that people keep saying that ICANN isn't ready to do this, and so the United States government should continue to hold a contract. But if you think about that, it's a little strange. What people are arguing is that the oversight has not been good enough, so we should keep doing it the way we've been doing it. The transition involves a bunch of accountability measures that are being added to the system to allow the global community of internet users, the people who actually use this system, to ensure that the oversight is well performed. And it gives people a bunch of new powers that nobody has right now over ICANN, the organization. This way, actually, it increases the accountability of ICANN. So it isn't ICANN doing it on its own. Instead, it's doing it under the supervision of everybody on the internet.
Okay, then. So you're saying that ICANN can bring some stability to the way in which global domain names are allocated. But what will ICANN's future look like if this transition is blocked? Would there be a backlash from foreign governments?
Well, I think that there's been a little bit of alarm about this, where people say, you know, oh, this is a critical thing, as though on October the 2nd, if it doesn't all go ahead, the world ends. And I don't think that that's the case. I think that if the U.S. government doesn't follow through on what it said it was going to do, then that will make other people wonder whether the U.S. government really believes that the internet works the way it was designed to work. And over time, there is the danger that people will start to think that this system doesn't really work very well. It's important to remember, actually, that the internet is entirely voluntary. Every single piece of the internet is done only because people want to continue to use that. And so if people don't like the system that emerges if the United States government doesn't follow through on what it said it was going to do, then it's possible that people will start to find another way to achieve these functions, and then we could see some fragmentation on the internet. I think that would take time. I think that there are a lot of commercial incentives not to have that happen, but I also don't really want to find out by running the experiment. It would be better, actually, just to complete this transition as scheduled.
Okay, then. Andrew Sullivan on the future of internet ownership there. Andrew, thank you for your time. Finally this week, Elon Musk, the boss of SpaceX, has a dream. It's 140 million miles from Earth, where the 45-year-old tech billionaire envisions a future with humans living on Mars. And his company wants funding to build the transport system to take us there. Mariana Sanchez tells us more now from the International Astronautical Congress in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Can humans colonize Mars? The question may not be science fiction anymore. The spacecraft manufacturer SpaceX CEO Elon Musk says he has a plan for interplanetary transport between Earth and Mars.
It would be basically, are you prepared to die? Then that's okay, then you know, you're a candidate for going.
By reusing rockets, he'd be able to have a fleet of 1,000 spaceships, taking off constantly, carrying 100 volunteers each time. A ticket to Mars could cost as low as $100,000.
Eventually, history suggests there will be some doomsday event. The alternative is to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, which I hope you would agree that is the right way to go.
Musk says populating Mars is ideal. Venus is a hot acid bath. Mercury is too hot, and every other planet is too far out. Mars is better than the Moon because of its size, resources, and atmosphere, and it's between 6 to 9 months away.
Musk said while the journey may be long and dangerous, travelers will be able to eat in restaurants, watch movies, or float. He said the trip to Mars will be fun.
At the Guadalajara International Astronautical Congress, Alejandro Padilla says the tech billionaire's ideas are inspiring.
I think it would be an incredible step. After man walked on the moon, going to Mars would be the next big thing.
But some experts say the challenges ahead are enormous.
The time, the distance, and also the radiation environment, that at the moment we don't really know how to protect people against the space environment that they will encounter going out to Mars.
Despite the challenges, Musk says his first unmanned mission will launch in 2018. And he hopes that in less than 10 years, he'll put the first man on the red planet.
And that is our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on whenever you'd like. You can also get in touch with us. You can tweet me at KamalAJE. Do use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or just drop us an old-fashioned email. Counting the Cost at aljazeera.net is the address. That is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria. From the whole team, thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.